Hi everyone, Scott with Dearly Departed Online here. And today I got in the mail the True and Strange magazine that was published in March of 1957. I got it because of the graphics on the front of it. I think that this is a spectacular piece of art. And it's kind of hard to find. I've seen it before and it's very expensive, and I luckily stumbled on a copy that wasn't as expensive as I've seen. And I was very anxious to read the story about James Dean speaking from the grave, and I decided to share it with you. And plus, it's a great magazine just to poke through because of the ads. I mean, these are, this is 57, so it's quite dated and quite funny to see. Motor overhaul. Read what these car owners say. This 36 Lincoln runs like new. Here's all you do. Satanism and witchcraft. There you are. That's quite a graphic image there. Huh. And here we are. James Dean speaks from the grave. Page 10. And I'll share it with you. Here's a startling after-death revelation about a young Hollywood actor who died in a violent auto wreck. Lots of people are saying that fanatics and money grabbers are keeping alive the name of James Dean. Here's a man who believes he may have talked with him. A man who wonders if... James Dean speaks from the grave. The editor's note, we are publishing this story just as it was received, and except for minor editing, nothing has been changed. With the current belief of life after death rising strongly, we're giving this one to our readers straight. By Robert DeKalb. Last night, I actually talked with Jimmy Dean. Though his voice was muffled and sounded as if it was far off, I could understand him as clearly as if he were right next to me. And his message was not to me alone, but to all of his present-day mourners. Tell them, he said, to stop mourning for me. I'm very happy where I am. Here, there is no confusion, no unhappiness, no cold, no hunger, and I have my mother with me, whom I lost when I was only 7 years old. The above dialogue I have written verbatim, to which I gathered at an interview with Anna M. Van Dusen. This woman, now 33 years old, was so, quote, sensitive during her college years that she was one of a group selected to assist in the ESP investigations. ESP, that was an old term, extrasensory perception. According to experts I questioned in the course of getting information for this story, Mrs. Van Dusen still retains the so-called, quote, hypersensitivity. Just what it is, no one could explain satisfactorily. Roughly, as I gathered it, this sensitivity is necessary before anyone can practice telepathy, clairvoyance, or any sort of mediumship. This reporter is just that, a reporter. While I am asking... That's Jimmy's car in the Shallam garage, Pier Angeli. Her mommy objected to the actor's strange ways. So this reporter is just that, a reporter. While I am taking no sides, pro or con, in this issue, I do want to point out that the, quote, experts I consulted about this woman were men whose names are big in the various sciences they represented. 3 were top psychiatrists, 3 were philosophers, 2 were doctors of medicine, and 3 others were university professors, whose names, if I mentioned them, everyone would know instantly. To further authenticate what Mrs. Van Dusen told me, I suggested a seance with just 2 of us composing it. She agreed to this readily. I explained to her that there was already too much information on this subject that was secondhand. I wanted first-hand information for the readers of True Strange. On the night of the seance, just the 2 of us were locked in her studio. You can take my word that there were no tricks, no gimmicks, no sheeted characters standing behind drapes or secret doors or anything like that. Mrs. Van Dusen is a college graduate, and anything that smacked of phony or fake would be an insult to her intelligence. There were no mystic lights, no crystal balls, and no mysterious tables. Mrs. Van Dusen was not pale-faced, nor was she dressed in a long white flowing dress. Anna Van Dusen is a very pretty married woman. She dressed very simply in ordinary street clothes. In the center of the studio was a couch on which she reclined, and alongside it a chair which I sat. The idea was that when she, quote, went under, into her trance that is, I was to be close enough to ask questions, and I was to go very carefully on these so as to not suggest anything to her already oversensitive mind. I lowered the lights while Mrs. Van Dusen made herself comfortable on the couch. Then I sat down on the stool alongside her. For about 5 minutes, she just laid there quietly. At first, she looked to be in a deep sleep. Then a low moan came out of her, then another. It sounded almost as if she were crying because of great suffering and confusion. Van Dusen. Who was it you wanted again? De Kalb. James Dean. Van Dusen. Oh, yes. Continued on page 68. This is a little funny because it continues kind of weird. Oh, they're so hard to find. Wait, energy. I'm coming upon a great massive amounts of energy. This will be it, but I'll have to search for him. There was a long pause and more moaning from Mrs. Van Dusen's lips. Finally, her hand was groping towards mine, found it, and held it tightly. Van Dusen, let me hold it so that I have a link with the world of the living. I believe now I have contacted the one you seek. De Kalb. Ask him some of the details surrounding his birth. Van Dusen. Born Marion, Ohio in 1931. Father and mother were named Winton and Mildred. De Kalb. What emotional event happened while he was still a boy? Van Dusen. Yes. Was 7 years old. His mother dies of cancer. He died a little too. Never really got over it. Terrible shock. Had something to do with his own early death. De Kalb. In what way? Van Dusen, the idea of death was planted in his mind. These were the seeds of destruction which he nursed all of his short life. His thoughts were preoccupied with death, but death is nothing more than a cessation of a particular body. The energy lives on. De Kalb, can he clarify that? Van Dusen, wherever he is, there is only energy, no bodies or human forms as we know them. When he died in that auto wreck, only his body was destroyed. The energy that kept him alive simply returned to where it had come from originally. Parenthesis. At this point, I had a million different questions I would like to have asked, but if I had, they'd have been called leading questions. Leading questions have a drawback of having suggested connotations. That was Morey Bernstein's trouble in the Bridey Murphy affair. Experts accused him of having used leading questions, thereby suggesting what he wanted from his subject. End parenthesis. De Kalb, ask him, as far as he can tell, is there any reason or significance in life? Van Dusen, each body that is born is an individual. Not the energy, just the body that is born. Certain cells and minute organisms in any one body are different from every other body. The pattern of a body's life is set even before it has been born by these cells and chromosomes. Not so the energy, however. This comes from a common universal fund, sort of like a bank. Whether a body turns out, quote, good or bad makes no difference. If the body turns out good, that was his or her reason for living. If a body turns out bad, that was his or her reason for living. De Kalb, what was the body of James Dean's reason? Van Dusen, he believes he was put here to symbolize the confusion of young people. De Kalb, why did he die so young? Van Dusen, that's just it. If he had lived to be older, there would have been no symbol. He'd have lived in vain. An older person cannot symbolize humanity's suffering. Then there might have never been any such thing as Christianity. Dean had to die while still young. De Kalb, but his acting, what of that? Van Dusen, just a device whereby his confusion could be brought plainly into public eye. De Kalb, were there any notable events leading up to his death? Van Dusen, yes, several. There were a few forces that tried to prevent him from dying. De Kalb, such as? Van Dusen, on the fatal day, someone suggested that Dean ride his racer to the track on a truck. More especially, there was a motorcycle cop who stopped him and gave him that ticket. These were actually energy forces trying to prevent him from dying, but Dean knew his time had come. De Kalb, did Dean have any preconceptions about so-called life after death? Van Dusen, Yes, a TV actress called Mila Nurmi, better known as Vampira, first suggested that there was some sort of life after death. With her, Dean did more than just dabble in the possibilities of spirits, mysteries, reincarnation, life after death, and assorted ideas like black magic. But I was sure of one more thing. I know now that something was actually happening. As I said before, I am neither pro or con on this subject. I'd rather leave that to the experts. I am just reporting what I did, heard, and saw. But I was sure of one thing. Mrs. Van Dusen, if she didn't have actual contact with the late Jimmy Dean, at least sincerely, she thought she did. Whether or not she actually did have contact with some sort of universal energy, I do not know for certain. One other thing I do know is that there was absolutely no phony or sham to Mrs. Van Dusen's trance. She was actually under. Since James Dean's Life and Loves have been published heretofore, and very widely at that, I did not go into these details here. I do not feel it was necessary. Most of us know the outline of his life and how he died. I asked Mrs. Van Dusen one more question, which I was saving till last because the answer was so startling. It went like this. DeKalb, what message does James Dean have for his fans, those people who loved him so and apparently still do since they are keeping his name alive? Van Dusen, James Dean says, if possible, try to tell them not to despair for him or his untimely death. Tell them, if you can, that he'll be back. In some other shape or form, perhaps, but he shall be walking amongst them again real soon. Mrs. Van Dusen began to stir rather uncomfortably. I asked no more questions. Probably the strain was beginning to tell on her. I simply sat quietly and let her come awake. When she woke up, she sat upright. What did I say? Anything helpful? I related the whole dialogue back to her. She was amazed, since she could recall nothing. Afterward, when she was fully awake and alert, she tried to explain it to me. If I actually did contact James Dean, and the words I spoke were actually his, that explains so much about life that we know nothing of. It answers the question of why we are here, where we go, where we came from. I must confess I was puzzled. I'm puzzled because I don't know what to think. But there's a lot of things we don't know about. How does the Earth stay on a fixed course? What is electricity, electronics, radio waves, television? Try to get someone to explain these things to you in detail, logically and intelligently. There are so many things we believe in, yet cannot actually see. Has anyone ever seen a radio wave? I could go on, but what's the use of it? I think it's time that our, quote, experts get onto the fact that here are some things that just cannot be explained, and they'll remain inexplicable until more and deeper research is done. At night, I often wonder if my indirect conversation with the late James Dean was real. To discover whether it was real or not, I am devoting myself to further research on this one subject. If James Dean does come back to this earth, I want to know why, and I want to know how. And I am sure there are millions of people who feel the same as I do. There you are. Will James Dean did he come back? According to her, it was very soon, and this was 1957. So it's quite likely that, according to her, he was already back. So that's my little story for the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, take care. Scott with Dearly Departed, signing off. Look at that. You heard me.